Welcome to part 2 of Pyrford TV Art's late autumn edition 2015. Our very own Anne Jones will be in conversation with Greg Freeman, whose poetry collection, Trainspotters, was featured in our summer special. But we begin by a taste of some new drama. You remember that we featured an interview with local playwright Brian O'Connell in our spring edition. He was preparing for his first full-length play, Sarah's War, set in the 1940s in England. He staged the production at the Guildford Fringe last July, and as Amanda Briggs reports, it's a classic story set in a romantic time, but with some modern-day perspectives on the human condition.
Set between 1944 and 1949, the story tells the tale of Sarah, played by up-and-coming Grace Stone, and her beloved grandpa, Richard Ward, are held hostage on their boat by a German U-boat lieutenant, Josh Bromley, and then bravely fight back to overpower Klaus and take control of the boat.
As it may reflect badly on his career.
You admit he has spent some time with you?
In Act 2, we find Sarah in a very different position, as an unmarried mother in post-war censorious Britain, fighting to keep her child and dignity. Ironically, her tragic situation is exacerbated as ex-POW Klaus, now calling himself Paul, tries to reach out to make amends.
For an hour, I thought I'd better come looking for you.
You said you were arriving by train.
Ah, yes, I did, but then I thought it would be easier to bring your belongings in a car.
Car? My belongings?
Mr. Jarvis appeared and asked me into his office. But let me tell you my news.
As the first night of an original production, with a mixed cast of new and established talent, the play was very well received by an enthusiastic and generous audience.
Listen carefully. There is a job going at the factory for a secretary.
I've really enjoyed it actually. I've not really had the experience of playing a lead role before, but it's a great play and it's a great role for a woman as well. I really enjoy the older aspect of it. I really enjoy doing the research of history, so I love doing historical plays. I've done a lot of war plays in my training at GSA, so I'm used to sort of having to delve into a different lifestyle and trying to figure out what it actually would have been like in that era. And I find that sort of the 40s and the World War era is really interesting anyway, because there's something I think most British people find particularly interesting.
A minimalistic set left much to the imagination, but the quality of the acting, frequent scene changes, excellent music score, sound effects and lighting did everything to create the necessary atmosphere and encourage the audience's willing suspension of disbelief. Characters were well defined and diverse. Grace Stone, as Sarah, rightfully and deservedly took centre stage. Richard Ward, as the stalwart grandpa, was the epitome of British spirit, conveying bravery and compassion.
Never give up on that quest, for love's opportunity may present itself at the most unexpected moments.
There are two other ladies that work in the factory. A local woman looks after their children.
Josh Bromley, Klaus Paul, had the biggest shift in character to deal with, and did so admirably and quite convincingly.
What do you think, Sarah? Will you give it a shot for a couple of months?
We've literally had maybe 6 full days to produce the play, and we had 2 days. We had 2 days a couple of weeks ago, and we've had these 3 days now. So on the day we'll be doing our dress rehearsal. So it's all a wing and a prayer, to be honest.
This play has much potential, and I hope one that we will see many more performances. It is a classic story set in a romantic time, yet delivered with modern perspectives on the human experience. O'Connell deals with a little considered topic, the plight of unmarried women and welfare in post-war Britain, bringing originality and new pertinence to the well-worn topic of World War II.
Oh, and he asked me to give you a message. He said something about a terrible misunderstanding and matron had misplaced his funds by mistake. He said you'd know what you mean, and to go and see him before you leave so you can collect the money.
Can I kiss you again?
Amanda Briggs was reviewing a new play for the stage by Brian O'Connell, Sarah's War. Well, we move now from a playwright to a poet. After a career in journalism, Greg Freeman recently retired and produced a collection of nostalgic poems, his first entitled Trainspotters. We featured the poetry in our summer special. Anne Jones went along to meet Greg, who lives locally, and began by asking him if a career in Fleet Street writing headlines for The Splash, the lead story for the next day's paper, actually helped him write his poetry.
Well, that was never particularly came easy to me because Splash being so important, the headline is often written by a committee. So if your actual headline gets through and approved and appears on the front page of the paper the next day, that's almost like scoring a goal. You can't compare it with writing poetry, except that what I would say is that sub-editing is very much getting the words down, getting rid of all the extra words, the superfluous words. And writing poetry is very much like that as well.
There's a nostalgia and romance about steam trains. Your poems certainly reflect this. Do you think you're a bit of a romantic, Greg?
That's a question that puts you on the spot a bit. I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by romantic, but what I will say is that I love the film Brief Encounter, and that is certainly a romantic film. Now, whether I like it because of the actual romance of Trevor Howard and Celia Johnson. Or I think it's more, I love the black and white, the smoke, the steam trains rushing through.
You deal with the iniquities of Dr. Beeching and the swinging cuts that he made to our railway industry. And there are several poems that deal with loss and war. How is the past for you?
Well, I think all the poems in that collection deal with the past in some way, sort of mining my own sort of backstory, my life, in a sense.
We've talked about your life as a newspaper man. What influenced you in your choice of career?
Well, just before I went to university, I dropped a little letter through the letterbox of the local newspaper saying I was interested in becoming a reporter. And nothing came of it. They never replied. And then I sort of forgot about it. I went to university. I did a sort of summer job, which was road sweeping, which I enjoyed greatly. But then the autumn came and my mother said I should take an indoors job, and I agreed with that. And she thought a nice safe job would be with a clerical officer with the Greater London Council, which I did do. And although it was a little boring at times, I managed to find within the great confines of County Hall in London, there was what was then the Inner London Educational Authority, and so I actually took a bundle of photocopying in mid-afternoon. I think I can reveal this now. I said I'll be back in a bit, and I used to go in there and I'd read a sort of biography of Dostoevsky or Hemingway for about an hour until I felt old to return, and so I returned. And one day I saw an ad in our local paper for a trainee reporter on our local paper, and I thought I really ought to apply for that. And I didn't know anyone on the local paper in journalism at that time except for one person who had actually this was in Kingston, in Surbiton, but the guy himself had come from Woking, where he'd fallen out with the editor, and I'd just known him vaguely from meeting him in a pub. And the paper itself was between editors, so it was the chief reporter who interviewed me for the job. This guy, very good reporter himself, put in a good word for me just on a couple of chance conversations we had in the pub. And I got the job. And I sort of fell into it by an amazing stroke of luck. When I retired 3 years ago from The Guardian, I sort of looked back and realised how lucky I was.
Where is the inspiration coming from for your next collection of poems?
I think naturally when you get a collection of poems out, there's a bit of a gap because you have to spend a bit of time thinking about how you're going to promote the book, trying to find places where you can do a reading and maybe sell a few copies and that sort of thing. You know, even for a fairly uneventful life such as my own, there's always stories to tell. There's a lot more to be mined. And so I sort of started off on that track again quite recently and I'm finding new stories to write.
Anne Jones was in conversation with poet and writer Greg Freeman. The full interview will be on TV Art's website shortly. More details of Greg and his writing can be found on his website, which is on your screen now. Well, that just about wraps up this edition of Pyrford TV Arts, Autumn Edition Part 2. If you missed Part 1, go to the TV Arts website and click on the link. Remember that all the background to Part 1 and Part 2 can be found on the TV Arts website. Well, thank you to all our guests for their contributions to the programme. And none of this happens by accident, although you may not believe that. A new edition of TV Arts returns to your screen in the spring with a preview just before then. And of course you can follow us on Twitter at #PyrfordTVArts. Well, that really is it for today. I'm Tim Matthews, and from all of us here in the studio, thanks so much for watching. We know you have a choice, and we'll see you in the spring. Goodbye. Okay, and we'll cut it there and we'll review it all and see how we went. So thank you very much.